Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
ABTB buddies, I missed a week and I apologize, but I'll tell you why. First, I had a grandson. Preston James was born on May 11th, and we went out there to be with my daughter, her husband, and Jackson, my other grandson, and Preston. And I didn't do anything podcast related then, obviously, because I was hanging out with family. And then we decided that we want to move to Huntsville, Alabama, and it turns out that I'm still marketable, and I got a couple job offers, and I took one. So I'm doing this from my son's guest rooms. I'm staying in Huntsville while we get the house sold, and there's a lot of moving parts with a new job, selling your house, getting a new grandson, and I fell behind. I thought I always would have enough episodes to spare, but I don't. I will definitely catch up and get better about that, but I do have a new episode this week. It's Jan Mcinnis, and it's a really good episode, and it's the last one I recorded, so if I don't get some recorded here pretty soon, then you may get another repeat, so just look for that. But if you haven't listened to some of the earlier episodes, I highly recommend it because they're all good. I did want to mention another comedy interview podcast I'm listening to. It's called Breaking Down Bits, which is different than Behind the Bits. It's Breaking Down Bits. Drew Jordan and Brian Gendron talk to comedians about a specific bit and how they wrote it, how they perform it, how it evolved, and all different kinds of stuff. What I really like about this podcast is, first of all, Drew and Brian shut up and listen. That's what so many podcasters don't do. They just shut up and listen. I appreciate that. But the other thing is they've got a set line of questioning, and you just need to listen to the podcast to understand how they format it. But they've got a line of questioning, which is very good, but they don't really hold themselves to it. So if a guest goes on a different tangent, then they let them do that tangent. They do bring it back around, and all the questions get answered. But it's a podcast where the host don't talk a whole lot and the guest does, and it's really, really good. It's one of those that I will be listening to every single episode because I learn something from every episode, and that's what I hope you guys learn from here. So check out Breaking Down Bits. It's on all the apps. You can find them on social media. Give it a listen if you like this one. Don't listen to that instead of Behind the Bits, but listen to it as well as Behind the Bits. It's a really good podcast. So I've got Jan Mcinnis coming up next week. I don't even know because I'm taking it one day at a time, baby. And thanks for listening. The numbers are still pretty good, and I'm still doing okay. So I appreciate you listening. Share it up, and I will see you on the other side of this crazy mess that I've got going on in my life right now. Bye-bye.
My guest today is Jan Mcinnis, and she has been making people laugh for over 25 years, and she gets paid for it. That's the big thing. She's written for The Tonight Show, along with many other late-night TV shows. Jan has written for the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the Huffington Post. She is a much-sought-after keynote speaker who can talk to groups about everything from finding the funny in change to flourishing from failure. There's a lot more to check out, so make sure you go to theworklady.com, spelled just the way you'd think it is, theworklady.com, to see everything Jan has accomplished and where you can find her perform. Let's talk to her right now. It's Jan Mcinnis. All I got to do is click a button there. You know, hey, thanks for coming on. When you get older, clicking those buttons, it's so much harder to find them.
Every time I think I'm technology, I can't learn anything else. Something else comes out and I have to learn it.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Thank you so much for being on the show. I took a kind of a deep dive into your career, and boy, you are busy.
I try, yeah. COVID slowed it down a little bit, but...
Yeah. I'm very impressed with the way you get into everything that is humor related, and I really like the way you do it. In this deep dive, I'm going to start off a little bit different because you said something in one of your podcast episodes that really stuck with me, and I think it can take us on a little journey to where you come from. But I was looking at your episode, and they're really neat little episodes. The thing I like about your podcast, first of all, is it's like maybe 10 minutes at the most. Yeah, five at the most. And man, there's a lot. You're dropping a lot of knowledge in that time. So I really enjoyed it. And you've got 150 some episodes, so I'm probably going to just listen to all of them while I'm driving. But one of your last episodes was when you talked about trying out for the last comic standing, and actually the two go rounds with that. And during that, you said something to the effect of, I wasn't really looking to be famous when I started doing stand-up comedy. And I wanted to dive into that a little bit more because a lot of new comics, what they want to do, obviously, is be famous. They want to either get the TV show or fill up the auditoriums or whatever. But in going back into some of the other things that you've written, you have said that you wanted to be a comedian ever since you were young. So being a comedian and not necessarily wanting to be famous, how do you put those two together and make a career out of that?
Scott, that is interesting you picked up on that, because you still got to take fame. You got to pick fame or fortune. I would take the fortune. I think I wanted to work in this business. I guess I started out with no plan other than be a working comedian and pay my bills, and it evolved into where I'm making a great living doing the corporate stuff and the keynotes, and I don't have to be famous. I just never, I thought fame would be great. I certainly thought I'd have some more TV shows, but I really never tried for them.
Yeah.
I have to say, I threw out a few tapes here and there, 15, 20 years ago. But I was doing so well and everything else. And it's funny how if you just let your career take you and you pay attention, it took me in a direction that I didn't even know. I didn't know keynotes existed. I didn't even know corporate comedy existed.
Right.
I knew comedy clubs, and I remember I'd worked the road really hard when I moved from Virginia, but started in Virginia, DC clubs, worked the East Coast quite a bit, and I had a traveling cooler. I had food, and every time I'd haul it into the hotel and set up at night. And I was staying with my sister's in-laws one night. And the mother-in-law looked at me, and it was like 11:30. I got in tired, and I had to get up early for another drive. And I started later. I was in my 30s, and I left my day job. And she looks at me and she goes, "How long are you going to be doing this?" And I remember I said to her, "This is my career. This is it." And but really stuck in the back of my head. Wow, this is. You're right. Do I want to still be hauling this cooler around in 20 years? The cooler still works. But so it was nice that I started paying attention to the other stuff. And I knew about corporate comedy a little bit because of my day job. I had some experience with that. And in fact, I was running a meeting, and we hired the Capitol Steps to do their thing for the dinner part. And I was standing there. I've been working comedy clubs. I hadn't left my day job yet. And wow, this is pretty cool. And I remember I paid them. And it was a lot more than comedy clubs. Yeah. And granted, it was split by 5 people, but I thought, there's something here. And I'd ask comedians, they'd say, no, there's just what they call private parties at Christmas time. That's it. And I think there's convention work. So I tucked that away in my head and went on the road, but always looking around going, I think there's something else here. So that's the short of it. I never felt like I was, every time I make a little effort, something else would pull me away. So I really never went for the fame, and I've done a good job. Nobody knows who the hell I am.
I do now.
I could go on the improv here in LA at Melrose on the New Faces, and I've lived out here 20 years.
Yeah, all right. Oh, that's great.
What do you do?
Do you think that starting in your 30s maybe had you a little bit more centered, and you just knew that you wanted to maybe not do what you're doing now and get into something that you actually enjoyed?
Well, I did enjoy the clubs. I really absolutely was free, and I had just left an office job after 15 years, so I did enjoy them. But it did. I'd go home after the clubs, after my set at night, and I'd work on jokes and stuff. The younger comics is a great gig if you were in your 20s, because every night there's an audience, Tuesday through Sunday, that wants to party with you, and free beer. And I'd see the younger comics going out and partying, and I did some of that. But I remember thinking, they don't know what a gift it is to have time to work on your own goals. Because I just spent 15 years in a job, and I know what it's like to spend a big chunk of your day commuting and into DC and working for someone else. You get home, there's no energy left to work for your own goals. So I knew what a gift it was so it did help me. Yeah. And I was a marketing person, so I think my marketing skills were better than my act when I started out.
Yeah.
My act caught up, but I really had good enough to be polite, to call when I called clubs. I had Mark Ridley up at Comedy Castle and gave me the nicest compliment once. He said, "I love working with you, Jan, because you're a professional. You don't come in and drink up the bar. You don't come in at the last minute and ask if you can get on for 5 minutes. You do the time you say. When I book you, you do the time you say you'll do. You're very professional." And so I think I got more work. I wasn't always the funniest person, but I got work because I was easy to work with, and they really liked working with me.
Yeah, that's so important. And it seems like most of the people that I talk to that mention that, when you say that, that's true of you, because the bookers they'll verify it. They'll say, "Oh yeah, Jan, she's great, easy to work with. I don't have to worry about her being late. I don't have to worry about her.
She's bonus top. She's funny, and she can do the job." But there's so much talent out there who hasn't gotten anywhere because they don't pay attention to the emotional intelligence, the softer skills, the things to get along with club owners, and their first instinct is to tell them to go to hell if something doesn't work. And I think I've burned maybe 3 bridges.
Yeah.
In the whole comedy, really yelled at somebody and screamed. A couple times when things haven't gone my way, or they've done something I didn't think was right, just walk away. Just, all right, I'm gonna win.
Yeah.
I'm gonna win.
So that's great. So let's talk about when you first made the plunge. Obviously, this is something you'd been thinking about since you were young. When you finally did your first open mic or whatever you did, what was it that kind of pushed you over the edge to make you do it?
I had so many starts and stops, Scott. It wasn't fun. When I was a kid, you had to get a job. I remember thinking I wasn't particularly funny, but I thought, or nobody thought I wasn't the class clown. But I thought comedy sounds like fun, so maybe I'll do that. I didn't know any way to do it. Went to college, graduated. I remember the night sitting with my parents and family at the restaurant, and I was thinking, now is not the time to tell I want to be a comedian. Just graduated from college. They just paid a lot of money. So I went into a day job. I finally, after probably 8 or 9 years, it was in the 80s, of the day job, 7 or 8 years, I went up at an open mic, and I killed. I had a great set, and it was in the 80s, the boom of comedy. And I was so freaked out by the lights because they're bright. You can't see anything. You can't even see the edge of the stage. And it was a small club. It was a comedy cafe in DC. It turned out to be my home club. But I left, and I was walking down the steps. The professional comedian who was on that night, because he was there to make sure the show didn't stink for everybody. He actually had jokes. He walked down, he grabbed my hand, and he goes, "Please promise me you'll come back. You have to do this again." And I didn't go back for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
I missed the whole, or 7 years, something missed the whole boom. I was so freaked out by the lights. I did take a class right around when I was kind of thinking of going up. And at the end, we had to do a 5-minute monologue. And the class was the teacher. It was like one of those open university kind of classes. You just take a night for free out of the catalog. And not free, but the catalog. And the teacher's wife and his mother were the judges. And I did great at my little jokes. I did some of the jokes I think I did at the thing earlier, 6 years earlier. I did some of those and did some new stuff. And they were just like, afterwards, they came up and said, "You have to do this again." Didn't do it. Waited another year. There was the Jay Leno Comedy Challenge.
Okay.
It was a big challenge in the 90s, early 90s, I think. And he was trying to find a comedian to put on the show, just a fun gimmick thing. He had comedians to put on, but a new one. So you had to send in a tape to get on. They were having every comedy club around the country. And so there was 3 in Virginia, Maryland, D.C., and we had to send in a tape, and then they would pick from the tape who got to go on stage. And then from that, they would go to the regionals, nationals. I sent it. I didn't know. I'm so I was so naive. I didn't know that they meant videotape. So I had been on stage. So I walked around my condo reading some jokes I'd written into my mini cassette.
Yeah.
All right. Like, you have to have a mini cassette for this.
I remember those. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. I mail it in, and I get a call like the next week from the woman at the TV show, and she goes, "Hey, we heard your stuff. We want to put you on one of the nights." And my first words were, "How many people entered?" Because it couldn't have been many. They picked me. She said, "Oh, we had like hundreds, and we picked you." So I got on. So they said, "You're going to be in the third night in Virginia." And I said, "Okay." The first night they had the Maryland competition, and it was on TV, the local news. So I watched it, and they said, "Professional comedians are vying for a chance on the Tonight Show." And I jumped straight out of bed and went, "Professional?" Oh. Professional. And so I was freaked out. So I practiced with a light in my face. I'd only been on that one time, like 8-9 years ago.
Yeah.
Practiced everything. Got to the thing. My only goal was not to be the worst. Okay. It's really.
I totally get that. Yeah.
I just didn't want to be the worst. And I watched it. I saw some of them and I thought, okay, I think I can do better than some of these guys. And I went up and had a pretty good set. A woman came up from the audience and said, "You got to do this again." The next day in the office, my friend came over and goes, "Hey, did you catch the newspaper?" I said, "No." "You're in it." They were one of my jokes, and I didn't win the contest. I didn't, but I was the worst. Waited another year, and finally I said, "This is it. This is it. I'm going on stage." It was by now 93 or something. I can't remember. And so, yeah, it'd been like a 10 or 11 year thing. Went on stage for one last open mic, and I went up and I just was killed again. I had just great show. And I remember I forgot half my act. In my head, I thought, they're laughing. Get off stage. They're laughing. So I got off stage. And the MC comes over. He's a professional guy, and he taps me on the shoulder while we're watching some of the other comics. And he goes, "Hey, call Pat tomorrow." I said, "Who's Pat?" And he said, "She caught your act. She books this place. She wants to give you some MC work." And literally, if you've ever had an epiphany in your life, I felt the world change. I felt that this is it. I walked out that night and thought, I don't know what I have to do, but this is it. I'm doing this. And changed everything. And I still kept my day job for a couple of years, but did comedy every night, weekend, all the time for 2 years. Got in the open mic scene and pretty rapidly got into working. Learned about one-nighters, got my butt kicked in those. Because you're up with professional comics in a bar, and and I finally left the day job. So it was it's not a long-winded answer, but it very many starts and stops. It wasn't like some people just do it and they're launched.
I really like what you said there. You didn't want to be the worst, because I didn't start until I was 52, and my wife would come with me to these open mics because she's a trooper, and I always asked her afterwards. The only question I'd ask, was I the worst? And she'd say no, and as long as I wasn't the worst, I knew I could keep going with it. And finally, probably after doing it for a couple of years, she finally said, "You're getting pretty good. You're closer to the top of the pack now. You're not swimming in the middle." And that's when I decided right before the pandemic hit that I was going to take it a little bit more seriously. And of course that hit. I'm doing this podcast. But anyway, I really liked your approach to just not wanting to be the worst. And did you do some speaking in your day job?
I did for marketing? Not a ton. I did some. I did a lot of travel. I worked for one was a 501c3, so I'd speak about benefits of donating, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But so I had some skills. I always, then and now, even comedy, and when I did that for my day job, I speak fast. That's my biggest thing. But so I had those skills. My dad always said, if you can speak in public, you make good living. He used to say that, and he was the CEO of a publishing company. So I've always remembered that. And comedy, I didn't know a path. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have anyone in my family that was a comedian or even entertainment. And so it was quite a journey.
Yeah. So aside from the lights, did you feel pretty comfortable being on stage then?
I was just nervous. The lights I got over that pretty quickly, because you have to, and I did so many open mics. And I think the first 2 years when I still had my day job, I was on stage almost every night of the week or watching comedy. And I got hired for that first open mic, after the guy said, call Pat. I called her. She hired me for that club. It was A Room, the Comedy Cafe in DC, and to open for Kevin Nealon from Saturday Night Live. It was huge. And so I really almost immediately got thrown into paid gigs. And so I started learning about emceeing. And my friend Rob Duffett, who started with me, he started saying, we should look outside of DC and do some MC work and put together a tape, put together a headshot. What's that? That's a picture of your head.
Yeah.
We didn't know. We just learned all this together. And then I started doing the one-nighters, and I really, those bar gigs, those one-nighter, if you're not familiar, and they were a little hard for me because they usually wanted dirtier stick, and people were there to drink and maybe listen to comedy, not always.
Right.
So, but I saw the pros. I worked with them, and it's sink or swim. And luckily I swam, but that was a tougher going. But I got some big A rooms to MC in, and gradually moved that way.
Great. Where did your material come from?
Yeah, I think with comedians, we talk about what bothers us. Kids, family, work. The work lady, my website, nobody can spell Mcinnis, so I thought, I got to come up with something. So I had a lot of work jokes, and so I put in theworklady.com.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of what bothers you. Some people sit down and go, I want to just be the whatever comedian. I want to be the pick something comedian and do that, or they want to just be topical. Or I started out writing topical jokes about news items. That's hard.
It is.
You got to write a lot of that. You know, because luckily it's always going to be a drunk celebrity. You just have to change their name.
Yeah.
But they're hard to keep a long act for the clubs. But so I gradually switched over to doing. Luckily, I was able to write jokes too. That helped. And I didn't have as much of a stage presence. I was more of a standing there telling jokes. A few times I was almost a Stephen Wright, deadpan, but that didn't feel comfortable. But I never got physical, acted out. I just like jokes. I don't like stories. I like jokes. Set up, punch. 3 or 4 jokes a minute, boom, boom.
Yeah. That's the classic way. Did you ever, this is a kind of weird question, did you ever decide how you wanted to hold the mic? Did you keep it in the stand at any point?
I decided I wanted to hold the mic because the less things that could go wrong. The stand, you get there, every comedy club in the country, half of them have crappy stands. You get there and it's a boom stand instead of something weird. Yeah. And I thought, you know what? The less I have, I always marveled at magicians because I thought, God, they've got all these moving parts. I know I can tell the jokes correctly. Yeah. And if the mic works, I can hold on to that. So the less I had up there, stool and water, that was about it.
Yeah, there's so many advances in the audio now. Technically, you could just have a little tiny headset on like the singers have and nobody see it. But I always feel like the mic and the stand is like Keith Moon from The Who used to say, they used to ask him why he was a drummer. And he said, well, because I have that drum kit between me and the audience. And I don't have to worry about the audience getting me. And I've always felt like the mic and the stand is my barrier between me and the audience. And that's my little, I guess it's just my security blanket.
I move it out of the way immediately and just hold the mic. And I like to hold something. I don't want a headset I have, for some keynotes, do the lav. I'm comfortable with that, but I really prefer just holding a microphone. Yeah,
it just seems more natural. So as your act progressed and you decided you wanted to, you started learning about these keynotes and the corporate comedy and stuff like that, there's obvious benefits to that. First of all, you're working during the day most of the time or early evenings versus being out till 2 o'clock in the morning. And after your drinking days are over, then it's no fun being there late anymore. That goes away. You've obviously built this into a pretty substantial career because not only are you doing corporate comedy, but you've got keynotes on just a ton of different subjects, even technology, which is where I work. And how did those start coming about? Because I've watched some of them and they're funny, and yet it's a learning experience, and humor works with everything.
Yeah, I think I'm the only comedian who doesn't like working nights and weekends.
Yeah.
So I had to find something else. So I did. I actually work I've got about 3 or 4 keynotes, but I do them in probably 10 different, we call industries. So technology, I do a lot of technology industry, finance, healthcare, women's education. I really enjoy talking to businesses. There's a lot of things comedians do. We're a very unique group. A lot of things we do, a lot of experiences I've had that can translate into your personal and professional life. Whether you're a nurse or you're a teacher or principal. So what I do is I like to go up and like my most popular one, and it's probably going to be really popular when we get back on the road. It looks like June is it. I'm booking a lot of stuff for that. Finding the funny in change, because I talk about how comedians, we come in, we're in change situations every single week in front of a different audience, different city. And we have weird stuff happen that we have to handle in the moment. How do you handle it? And so I give people some tips on how comedians handle it. Things that I love, being able to transfer the skills I learned as a comedian with a lot of humor into how you can handle change with humor, and how people can handle it, and what do comedians do.
I really liked what you talked about, diffusing tense situations. And it's so important. And it's funny because I've been a regular 9-to-5er for a long time, and the reason why I got into comedy is because I was one of those that could diffuse the situations with saying something funny. Sometimes it's a little sarcastic, and sometimes it's just letting everybody know about the elephant in the room, so it's not hanging over like a dark cloud. And if you say it funny, everybody laughs, and you can go on with what's important in the meeting you're in or whatever you're doing. And I really liked how you put that forth, because I think it's something that the way you did it, it's something that a non-comedian could take and say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense," because you say go to your sarcastic self, and that's that if you go to that, those thoughts are always there. You can't really push them away, and you can soften them and make them something that actually works and makes the meeting go forward.
And the beauty with business is, first of all, no one's expecting you to be funny, so if you are, it's good. But secondly, you don't have to be comedy club funny. And even if it doesn't work, even if you toss out a little humor, people appreciate that you're trying to lighten the situation. They don't get mad at you. They get mad if you're in a comedy club and you're not funny. Then you get into trouble. But in business, people appreciate it, and it's got some great benefits. Like a great way to connect with people and have people find out. You can find out about people by the humor they use. Just start listening if they're snarky. What kind of frame of mind they're in. Great way to diffuse tension. Changes the energy. You don't have to do a lot. You can do one joke, one funny thing, one funny observation. Change the energy in the room. Right. And it's a whole new ballgame. So it's a real business skill. I also talk about actually putting humor in business for sales groups, because people want to do business with people they like. And you want people to listen to your message. You better try to use a little bit of humor. And I'm thinking, as we come out of COVID and quarantine, look how much we're all used to being entertained. Yes. So now it was important to use humor before. It's really important now, because you are really going to lose it, the audience, and lose the interest if you don't try to be, again, you're not trying to be a comedian. You're just trying to lighten the mood, lighten the situation a little bit. Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny because not only am I in technology, but I'm in sales. I can definitely commiserate. I was going to say commiserate because I'm in sales and don't necessarily after 6 or 20 years. It's been a long ride, but anyway, the using humor, and also comedians. Well, some comedians, most good comedians have some self-awareness, and they also have a good awareness of the room. And sometimes the room is just you and a client, and sometimes it's you on a Zoom conference, and sometimes it's just you on the phone. And you can pick up on the way the audience or your potential client or whatever is thinking, and what's important to them, just by listening to a few things that they say, and just use that. And one of the marketing messages, they say you have to be hit with something like 7 times before people take any kind of action. Find a way to stand out. You've got to find a way to get your message out there and be memorable, and you can do that with humor. So people, then they want to do business with people who are fun and nice, and they can approach you, and they feel like they can talk to you if you've been using some humor. So it's a huge business skill. I wish I could get the message out there more about this, because people are missing the boat. And really, again, as we come out of quarantine, everyone on the planet's used to Netflix and being entertained, and they are not going to put up with boring conventions where they just run keynote speakers through on a conveyor belt with a message. You got to have something in there that's a little bit entertaining.
Yeah.
To get people to want to come
and it's funny, I'm not a big media guy, so I only watch what I want to watch, and it's actually usually not comedy, and it's usually not what everybody else is watching. I'm not a Star Wars guy. I'm not a Marvel. None of that stuff really works for me. I like real stuff, and I guess what you call chick flicks. I lay in bed with my wife and we watch all these series that have strong female leads, and I like that because it's believable. You don't have to suspend reality in order to watch it. I watch that kind of stuff, and all my friends think I'm nuts, but I love it. And
I'm a murder show person.
Okay, I like those too.
CSI. That would have been Forensic Files, all that stuff. Oh my Lord. People say, "Why aren't you married?" I said, "Because I watch Forensic Files."
Yeah. You know how the body's going to be hid.
Yeah. It's not like Grandma and Grandpa on the farm where Grandpa just disappeared.
Yeah.
Now they can find that.
So how did you go into writing for some of the late night TV shows?
Mostly the Tonight Show, and I've written for, but I've sold to greeting cards and syndicated cartoon strips and guests on the Jerry Springer Show and radio. And I know my parents are proud. A lot of radio. You know what? Again, by keeping my eyes open to opportunities. A friend of mine wrote for radio, a prep service where and he'd write jokes for them, and they had hundreds of stations around the country. And when I was moving to LA, I called him and said, "Hey, could you connect me with them because I need some money when I move out there?" And he did. And he was very gracious, said, "You're very funny." And of course, and I'd done topical jokes when I started out, so I knew I could write news story jokes. Leno, again, at one point he had a fax machine. This is how old it is.
Yeah.
A fax number, you could get that number and fax in to this fax machine, and then you would just be like on the road or whatever. You get the mail, and it would just be a check with a number. You call up his assistant, and it would say, "She'd go, yeah, that's the tiger joke or whatever." So that's how you find out. My first joke was I'd been on the road forever, and I came home and called her up. I got the check in the mail. I was so excited, and it was a Super Bowl joke, and
cool.
Very exciting. So I didn't sell tons, but I sold enough. And greeting cards, again, just networking with people. Networking. If you want to do this, hang out at the comedy clubs, meet the comics, call the radio station in your town, and say, "Hey." They'll always take. What the heck? They don't need to use them if you write them and see if they use them. I just tripped into all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it worked. I'm very, very fortunate. I never pursued writing and like a sitcom or something. It's funny when you say, did you ever want to be famous? The sitcom, everyone, do you have a sitcom? No, that's like saying to somebody who works at IBM, "Are you CEO?" We're not all going to get a sitcom, and that's not really what I got into for. The writing on the sitcom, people say, "Oh, you write, so you get on this." No, that's too much like a day job. I don't want to write on it. I don't want to have to go into an office every day.
Right.
Though I understand they have a lot of good snacks in the writer's room, but I like freelancing. I like that part of it, and I write for. I don't do a lot of writing now because I'm just super busy with other stuff. But I have a few big projects that are on hold that hopefully are going to regenerate once all this is over with. Some big groups, some big companies. But I've written for companies and helped them, wart removal cream and all sorts of fun. There's humor in that for sure.
Some of the ads that are going on, there's this liquid death water. Have you ever seen the ads for that?
Must be an Indiana thing.
No, so a guy from LA was interviewing me on his podcast, and he picks up this can of liquid death water. So it's all over, but they're taking this satanic bent about it that you have to give them a drop of blood in order to be in their club and get their water.
Too many needles. I can't stand needles. There's too much of that stuff these days.
It's pretty genius because it's actually taken off for them, and they're doing really well. And it's just water in a can. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And it was just so funny when he picked it up because he's a clean comic too. And I'm like, how did that ad appeal to you? because it doesn't fit you at all. But yeah, it's funny that some of these like Manscaped and Dollar Shave Club and stuff like that, you can tell that is not just an ad person coming up with that stuff. Somebody in the comedy world had to give some input.
Yeah. And companies, I've written written for all sorts of companies, or just people running their own business that want to punch up a sales letter written for realtors and that sort of thing. Just add a little bit of humor. So I enjoy it, but like I said, it's busy now. I haven't done a lot of that recently. I cherry picked the really good ones. I have friends I'll send off the other stuff too that are very good writers. So.
Right. Now, I've talked to actually several people who do corporate comedy, and I get different perspectives on how they got into it and how they approach it. So if a comic has, say, 30, 45 minutes of clean material and they want to approach a company to do their annual meeting or whatever, and this is not really keynote so much, but just do some comedy for whatever event that they're having, first of all, how do you put yourself out there to get that? And you're probably going to have to go back to when you were first doing it, but how does that go about, that you actually make a connection with somebody?
I think the easiest to get into, if you want to start, really associations, because there's an association for everyone. There's, everything from the American bankers to whatever. And it really, when I started doing it, I went backwards. I started with getting in with speakers bureaus, and they book you, but really they didn't have it. This is 15, 20 years ago. They didn't have any, or 15 years ago, they didn't have any clean women comedians that were funny. I had one of them say to me once, it's hard to have someone follow you the next year because you're so funny, you're comedy club funny. We can't find anyone that came out of the clubs that wants, that does this sort of thing. So bureaus really don't start beating up on them if you don't have any experience, because they're not going to book you. They've got hundreds of comedians. But so associations, what you do, and just go to the National, like American Bankers Association or whatever it would be. I don't know. There are literally thousands. Yeah. And each state has a chapter, and you can call but you got to look and see if for the most part, they'll have a keynote. A lot of times they won't have comedy, or they won't have entertainment. So you got to find which ones do entertainment, so you're not wasting your time. And at the time, I did a lot of calling. I have an assistant now that does my marketing. And I think getting a presence out there on the internet as well. But you know what the key, I think, would be corporate and association groups want to know that you have done this before. Comedy clubs want to see a 45-minute tape. If you want a headline, you got to show 40. They don't believe that you have 45 minutes.
Right.
I got most of my work for the corporate off of a 7-minute tape with probably 5 jokes, and it was a splashy sizzle reel. Yeah. They want to see testimonials from people who did it. And one thing I lucked out doing in my comedy, and again I backed into it. I was working comedy clubs. I was in New Jersey, driving to a club in New Jersey. I called this club in Iowa, and the guy that answered the phone, I said, I'm a comedian. I want to do some work your club. Can I mail a tape in? And he said, well, my partner and I from the club split. He took the club. I do the corporate work. Are you clean? I said, yeah. And he said, send me a tape. I'll take a look. I don't have any women. So I sent him a tape, and he called back and said it was really funny. He goes, what he did, he said, I'll bring you, his name's Keith West, but don't everyone bug him, out of Iowa. He's a great guy. But he brought me out, and I said, every Christmas for about 2 or 3 years, and he would string together Christmas parties. And I said, I don't care what I get paid for these parties. I want them to commit in writing in the contract that they will give me a quote, a nice quote saying they loved it. I don't care what, because I need that quote to show that I've done these before. So whatever you've done, I think people put the cart before the horse. They start calling places. I'm funny. Look at my tape. Well, nobody wants to look at your tape. They really don't. I don't like watching other tapes. No one wants to watch your video until you give them a reason to. So you got to have your quotes and I've done these, and really have your package together that give them confidence that you're not going to go on stage and get them fired. And go on stage, because it's very different. The drunk guy in the front row heckling you might be the CEO who's writing your check. Yeah. So you can't win. In a comedy club, you have to win with the heckler. You have to, because you won't get hired back. Yeah. In the corporate, many times you have to just let it go. Yeah. Have fun, goof around. Right. You can't slam somebody, and you can't cuss. I mean, you really can't. Or you can, but you won't do it that much. You won't work that. But you have to get some good quotes. You have to get your package together, get some clips of you, and don't just say, I can do this clip without cussing. Yeah. No, you got to have a clip that shows you're not cussing. I've had that. I've had comics say, here's my clip. And I said, but you say even the word hell or damn. I said, I said, you probably can say that when you get on. You may be able to. You read the audience. I probably said damn or hell once or twice in 25 years.
Yeah.
It worked. I knew the audience, but otherwise, you get yourself together and start looking like someone they want to hire. Get your website together. Get your quotes out there, and then start contacting the different groups and make sure they're a group that actually does what you do. A lot of times there are agendas on the website. There's stuff so you can. It's a very slow process. I guess there's a list you can buy and you do a blast, but I think you'd be better trying to network one-on-one, on word of mouth, and talk to other people, talk to comics, and get in with a comic who's at your level, and you're both trying to do it. Then you can switch leads and such. After you do one, they could do one. I've done that with people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I dig that. So your approach to a gig then, say it's the American Bankers Association or it's a particular bank. One of the nice things about associations is if you do well, they all go back and say, Jan should do our annual meeting.
You know what? Yeah. Half the time they go back and somebody's uncle is, no, we're going to go with Bill because he's $5 and Jan's more. So,
we just got to give them a plate.
But every group does have, and go for the bigger states, obviously. The smaller states don't have any money. But start with small. Start with some state, or some city groups. Or start with, your local chamber of commerce or something that you can get on stage and get some quotes and get your name out there and get your practice and get your chops built before you start just jumping into the big national convention. You don't want that. You want the smaller stuff anyway. If the price is right, I'll do the small stuff. I don't care.
So I went off track there. As far as your approach, so you've got this, say you're doing it for Microsoft, and one of the things they want is like topical stuff. They want stuff that's going to resonate with Microsoft people. How much work do you put in putting together a few minutes to get them geared up to say, oh yeah, I know what she's talking about because I work here?
Yeah, and again, I do more keynotes now than corporate. When I did the corporate comedy pretty heavily, I have an interview process. I have a list of questions, and I'm happy to share that. If anyone wants to send me an email, I'm happy to share that. And I don't send them the questions because they'll give you one-word answers. Yeah. So I just set up a time, and I said, we're going to take 20 minutes, and I'm going to find out about your group. And I go through and ask what their theme is, and what are some of their headaches and challenges, and what are they dealing with right now, and the copiers, we've had trouble with the copier. So if you can reference that, doesn't even have to be that funny of a joke, but you just reference it, and you're golden. People will go, oh, she knows us. And when I started out, I had about 40 minutes of material. You need about an hour of material to do it. I had about 35, 40 minutes. And then it was like, okay, I'm a fast writer. I'm going to write jokes, 20 minutes of jokes for these people. And sometimes my act couldn't even follow those jokes. They were so good. People were like, keep talking about us. Yeah. But in 5 minutes, a few minutes of just a couple minutes. Keynotes, it's one or two jokes, just so people know, she knows our industry. She's not just doing a canned. For me, now a lot of comics make a great living not doing that. They go into corporate and they don't customize at all. They don't. I like it. I like to learn about the groups. And if I do a healthcare nursing group here, I can use those jokes probably and do the next nursing group or modify them. But people just love hearing about them. So you got to watch out that when you talk to the committee or the people, because sometimes they'll say things like, oh, but this happened, but don't talk about it. Don't tell me that. Or they'll say, they'll tell you stuff like, oh, make fun of his divorce, make fun of her hair. No, you wouldn't do that in person. I'm not making, but so you got to watch the information they give you and really weigh it. Is this something that I can have fun with? Only once, I think I did an event. It was great. It was killing when I started, and they made a funny product. I won't say what it is, but it was, and I wasn't even making that much fun of the product, but it was a funny product. But the CEO was glaring at me, just glaring, and the place was exploding. And finally, after about a couple minutes, I went into my act. Yeah. It turns out he was Italian. He didn't understand the humor and joking about the company. And I wasn't mean. I wasn't doing mean company stinks kind of stuff, but he didn't think he took their product very seriously. Yeah. So, that my bad because I didn't understand that. And I just took what the committee said and I should have really dug a little deeper and, 2 jokes in, I probably should have just switched. Keep going, finally, I got at one point where the, what do you call the centerpiece was between me and him, so I couldn't see it. That didn't work, so whatever. You win some, you lose some.
Oh, some people just don't get it. That's okay.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I noticed about you is you have one of the best press kits I've seen. They call it the EPK or your media kit. You've got a lot of great content in there. Did you put that together yourself, or did you get help with that?
Where did you see it? On my website?
Yeah, it's on your site. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to look. I don't know.
We've actually got it in sections. You've got different. You've got different sections, and I think some of it's for keynote, and some of it's for stand up, and it's really nice how you put it together. And that's one thing that's usually the last thing a comic thinks about doing is the headshot and the press kit. And obviously, if you send that along with all your recommendations and all the things that you've done, that obviously has to have some weight. But I just thought yours was really good.
Oh, thanks. My marketing background again kicks in. But the thing, the comics, and you forget, I was lucky that I started before Facebook and social media, so my crappy sets are not nowhere.
Yeah.
Hopefully. There's nothing on the internet. Hopefully. If you're a comedian now and you start out and you've got some stuff up there and you want to get into corporate and you're cussing or whatever, you gotta, even if you have 1 million hits, if you want to move corporate, they're going to find that. And there's no amount of, don't worry, I know I won't say it, that you can say, because they're not going to believe you. And frankly, I wouldn't believe you if you got it. Because if you say it and they go, and later you go, well, I had it on my website, and the meeting planner is going to get fired and they don't have a leg to stand on. So anything that could hurt you, now you have to look at stuff that could really hurt you. You didn't have to do that when I started out. But now, not just what can help you, what can hurt you.
Right. Now, going back to club days, you having a clean act like you did, and the clubs, they obviously want funny, but sometimes you get into a situation, whether you started emceeing, that I'm sure you did some feature, and then you did the headlining. You get into a situation like maybe if you're the feature and you're stuck between two completely filthy people, and you come out. How do you overcome that? Because sometimes they expect it to keep going like that.
My biggest bit of advice, I was headlining a club once in Albuquerque, and the comic ahead of me, the feature actor, he started the week out by saying, I want your job. And the club owner said, Jan's clean. So he goes, the club owner wants me to be cleaner because, and I said, do your own thing. I'm not going to tell you to be clean. I'm not going to tell you anything. So he went up and proceeded to be as filthy and he was doing just getting the audience riled up and yelling and getting them to shout back. And I went out and followed it every single night. And the last night he goes, I don't get it. He goes, I'm throwing everything I got at him. And you're still following me. He's basically saying, I'm trying to make you, so you can't follow me, which I knew he was.
Right.
And I looked at him, I said, do your own thing. Just do your own thing. They will see how good you are. You'll be funny. You'll be unique. You'll be you. People are paying for you. If you cuss, I tell comics, if you're really dirty, you're going to do material like that, but you're going to find a different venue than I will. And also just make sure there's a punchline before it is not a punchline. So make sure you find that, but be you. People are paying for you. So you may, if you're going to follow dirty acts, you may end up bombing some more. I had to follow a guy that was humping the bar stool. And,
we got one of those in our town.
And I went out. I know, and the audience loved it, and there's one well-placed line. I just walked out and looked and said, I was going to sit on that. And the place went nuts, and then I was going into my act. So, but a couple times when I follow people, I have maybe 2 mean jokes. I'd have to go out to get this audience settled down and just go at the loudmouth.
Yeah.
So 2 jokes. I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't want a third one because I don't got it, just to get them to know I'm not afraid of you. And I'm not going to take this. You got to don't try to get more energy if you're not. Don't try to be quieter. Don't try to be dirtier. Don't try to be less dirty. Be you. And you're gonna. And if you're good, and if you got good material, and you've been doing this, people are gonna see you. And and they'll eventually book you and put you in the spot that you should be in, and with the people you should be with.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't like to talk about my own sets, but our club, the local club's right by Notre Dame University here, and it's really funny because our open mics were on Tuesdays, and sometimes we would completely fill the club with Notre Dame students, and which is nice for an open mic because you're actually talking to people, but the comedians, the local comedians here, most of them are pretty filthy, but they protect me. And I was doing a joke and I said crap or something like that. And that's probably the strongest word I have in my whole act. And one of the young ladies from Notre Dame she said, you can say shit. She just yelled it at me. And one of my comedian friends was very close to her. And she said, no, he doesn't do that. Calm down. And even though they all do the stool humping and all that kind of stuff, they know who I am, and they were supportive of me.
On a couple occasions, with a corporate event where one time this guy yelled something, he came out of the bathroom and yelled something, and it gave me a chance to stop because I wasn't doing well. And I stopped and I said, if you're in a comedy club, I could go back at you with that, but I have a contract that says I can't be dirty.
Yeah.
And it really changed. The show didn't go that much better, but afterwards all the people were talking to me.
Yeah. And
then I called the agent and said, man, they need a magician or something. If they want clean comedy, they don't want clean comedy.
Yeah.
They need something that is interactive. And the guy said, what are you talking about? The CEO called and said he loved you. So the only person in the room that I had to impress was that guy. But because it gave me an opportunity when the guy yelled, I just took a whatever in the bathroom. I was able to jump in and say, I can't say anything because I have to be clean. And they were shocked that there's a contract that said I had to be clean. Sometimes you get an opportunity to jump in and say why it's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I bomb in some clubs that want dirtier, but dirtier comics. Certainly, I've worked clubs where I know the guy's funny, but he's so dirty. And then I worked a New Year's Eve gig with him once, and he had to take the F word out of everything, and he could not follow me.
Yeah.
And he said afterwards, he goes, I couldn't follow you, Jan. I just water my act down so much. And I said, what'd you say? Yeah. We had this New Year's Eve gig.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just be funny. And if you come from, I personally, I cuss like a sailor, and my phone finishes if I type the word F in, you know what it's going to say. So that's just the way I am. But the way I look on stage, I'm like super tall. I'm 6'5", and I look like either your basketball coach or your pharmacist. And it just doesn't. If I go into an F-bomb tirade, it just doesn't fit me. And so working clean is just easy. It's actually easier for me because I know I don't have to say those things, and saying in front of a lot of people just makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable.
For me also, I wanted my friends and family and coworkers and whatever to come out and enjoy it, and I don't want to be embarrassed. I just don't get into the sex jokes and that. But again, be you, because people are paying for you. Yeah. If that's the way you are as a person, I mean, I cuss too. I don't always, stub my toe. I cuss. Yeah. But on stage, I just think it's funnier. It's more creative to find the punchline and to get people to make the connection. You don't have a sex joke. You just don't have to be graphic about it. Yeah. Make the connection in your head, and I know what she's talking about. Right. I have a lot of those jokes, and you can do them anywhere because corporate or club or whatever. So you've got more venues open to you if you're clean. But again, you gotta do what you think is funny. Yeah, and you'll sell it. If you think it's funny, you'll sell it. Yeah,
yeah, no doubt. But have you ever worked with Mark Rickadonna?
No.
Okay, he's commenting here. He's the interview that comes out tomorrow, but you probably can't see it from where you're at, but he's an East Coast guy and very funny, and he does acting and producing and stuff like that too. But he said he respects the fact that you can work with the blue comics and still keep your head above water. So that's the gist of what he said in about 4 messages. But yeah, he's a really nice guy. But I wanna go back. To wrap it up, I want to go back to that little podcast I listened to about the last comic standing, because there's a little bit more to it. You stood in line first and then decided that you didn't want to do it after you saw the paperwork, but then you were actually asked to do it and did well, but didn't go forward. One of the things you said after that was it didn't really upset me, and I didn't get all that disappointed because it wasn't necessarily where I needed to be.
Yeah,
it wasn't not on your radar. Yeah, and I guess the approach that you take, I really respect the fact that you take that kind of approach, because some people would have quit comedy just because they didn't get through on their audition somewhere or in some other comedy contest and stuff like that. And if you were to give a new comedian advice, they're at the point where maybe they're getting ready to feature or something like that, and they come up with something that could be a potential disappointment like that, what advice would you give somebody that just called you and said, Jan, I'm going to quit comedy because this happened to me?
I'd say, first of all, check your goals. What is it, something you wanted? Is it something you really want? Fame would be nice. It wasn't something on the radar. I think I got a little turned off of it when I was out here in LA, and somebody who had been on the Tonight Show, a week later, a friend of mine saw him selling in Target, having people fill out credit card applications. My goal with comedy was to do it, and then it was to do it where I had a career, like a regular life. I could buy a house. I could have nights and weekends off. I could, go to it as a job. And shockingly, I found that, and I had no idea keynote even existed, but I found that. Yeah. So if your only goal is to get 5 minutes on Tonight Show, and I remember thinking when I'd been out here about a year, I could spend 20 years trying to get 5 minutes on the Tonight Show. Mm. But if that's your goal, work your ass off to get it. Mm-hmm. Get used to being told no. I mean, right. It was Rosie O'Donnell, I think I read years ago. Someone said, "What would your advice be?" And I'd say, quit now, because if I can make you quit, it takes to stay in comedy. And I like to say, yeah, stick with it. Pick out what it is what can you put up with? If you want your 5 minutes of fame and you're willing to waitress to do it until you're 50 and have at it, right. That's what you want, do it. But you don't get discouraged, because it's also so subjective, and connections. And I mean, I've seen people on these late night shows that are not funny, and they don't have good sets, but they have the connection, or they have the look, or they have the whatever they got to get on there. Mm. Use whatever you got to get on there. Expect a lot of rejection, but also pay attention. Is there some other way you can fulfill that sort of comedy thing without, if you really can't get your Tonight Show spot or whatever, what else can you do to fulfill that?
Right. Yeah, the Tonight Show spots don't mean as much anymore. So, yeah.
No, I just saw an interview with Paula Poundstone, and she said, back then it made you you were made. But now, there's so much that I've never had a corporate ever, anyone say, we can't use you because you aren't on Comedy Central. Now, I had one booker that would never headline me because I wasn't on Comedy Central, and I stopped working for them because the headliners were so bad, and they couldn't follow me. And I'm like, I know I don't have any credits, but I know I can do. This person's been on Comedy Central, but I can't work for like this.
Now you're fighting against YouTubers. They did one funny viral video that lasted 3 minutes, and then they get booked to headline and do 60, and it doesn't work.
No, that's what happened when I was doing the club. Sitcom stars would think, the summer's off, I'm going to go do 60 minutes of comedy, and these road comics eat you up because they don't. First of all, they're pissed off that you're getting more money, and people are out there really expecting. If you're famous, you got no time. You better be funny off the bat. Yeah. If you're like me, you got about 60 seconds. Yeah. No, I take that back. If you're like me, unknown, you got about 60 seconds to be famous and to be funny. Mm. If you're famous, you got 5 or 10 minutes to be funny, because they like you already. They're there. They like you already. But if you're not funny in 5 or 10 minutes, and I've worked with stars who weren't. Right. Then people get mad. I think these YouTubers are going to be, some of them may be able to make it over to the comedy side, but some of them are just going to try to make a quick buck. And they're going to be flash in the pan and realize it is hard to hold someone's attention. That's why we start open mics of 5 minutes and 3 minutes. Yeah. Because to hold someone's attention for 45 or an hour, it is hard. Yeah. And so don't just try to make a quick buck on it.
No doubt.
stay in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed talking to you today, Jan, and I think you dropped some great knowledge. I'm using that young terminology, dropping knowledge, and that's part of my act, too. I call my wife my bae, my boo, and my shorty all in one bit. Just, it's so the young people know. Yeah, and it gives them something to laugh about. So where can people find you if they want to either book you or just find out what you've done?
Go to my website, theworklady.com, and feel free to also jan@theworklady.com. Send me an email. I'm happy to chat. I always enjoy talking with other entertainers or would-be entertainers or whatever. Yeah.
Great. It's been great having you on, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, Jan.
Thanks, Scott. Take care.
Mm-hmm.